The afternoon was supposed to be a simple walk near Sora's property. Blueberry led the way, pushing through dense ferns, with Rum, Zia, and Asagi trailing close behind. They moved deeper than intended, the familiar trees giving way to a section of forest that felt older, quieter. Then, the ground dropped away into a shallow ravine. Sora stopped first. Half buried under a tangle of ancient roots and moss sat a hull of dull, tarnished metal. It was a ship, shaped like a teardrop, its surface scarred by time but structurally sound. They scrambled down the slope, boots sliding on loose soil. Blueberry reached out, pressing a palm against the cold, unyielding exterior. The metal groaned under the pressure. They found a seam, a manual release lever, and with a collective heave, the hatch hissed open. The air inside was stale, smelling of ozone and trapped dust. They stepped across the threshold, flashlights cutting through the gloom. Control panels flickered with a rhythmic, ghostly pulse. Tools lay exactly where they had been dropped, and personal effects sat on the consoles, undisturbed for decades. Standing in the center of the bridge, the five friends looked at each other. The silence of the ship was not empty. The task was too large for 5 people. By the next morning, Lemon, Jasper, Euler, and Petra arrived at the clearing, carrying heavy crates of tools and cleaning supplies. The team split the labor. Rum, Zia, and Asagi took the interior, armed with wire brushes and industrial solvent. They spent hours scrubbing away decades of grime, revealing the original metallic sheen beneath the rust. The air inside the ship grew thick with the smell of chemicals and sweat. Meanwhile, Euler crawled into the cramped maintenance crawl spaces beneath the deck. He worked with a soldering iron and a diagnostic scanner, his hands moving with precision as he bypassed corroded circuits and reconnected severed power lines. The ship groaned in response to his touch. Jasper and Petra hauled out debris, clearing the bridge of old, non-functional equipment to make room for their own gear. Days bled into weeks. The rhythmic clang of hammers against hull plates became the soundtrack of their lives. They replaced fuses, recalibrated the navigation sensors, and tightened every loose bolt. Finally, the last wire clicked into place. Euler wiped grease from his forehead and nodded. The main power grid hummed, a low vibration that traveled through the floorboards. Blueberry took the pilot's seat, hands hovering over the primary ignition sequence. Sora, Rum, Zia, and Asagi strapped themselves into the jump seats, gripping the armrests until their knuckles turned white. Euler gave a thumbs up from the engine bay, his face smeared with grease. Blueberry flipped the master switch. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a low-frequency thrum vibrated through the hull, rattling the loose tools on the floor. The ship groaned, the metal plates straining against the sudden surge of power. Outside, the ancient trees began to sway as the thrusters ignited, kicking up a cloud of dirt and dry leaves. The vessel lurched, the force pinning them back into their seats. It rose, hovering for a second, before the main engines roared to life, a sound like tearing silk. The forest floor vanished beneath them, shrinking into a dark green blur. They climbed, the air pressure inside the cabin shifting as they pierced the cloud layer. The sky transitioned from blue to a deep, bruised purple, then finally to the absolute black of the void. The shaking stopped. The roar faded into a soft, rhythmic hum. They were weightless. Blueberry looked out the viewport. Blueberry steered the ship toward a planet glowing with iridescent violet hues. They landed on a surface covered in oversized, bulbous vegetation. The crew stepped out, boots sinking into soft, spongy soil. Zia scanned a jagged neon green fruit for toxins, the device chirping a steady green light. She sliced it open, revealing a glowing, translucent core. They passed pieces around, tasting a sharp, citrus-like sweetness that lingered on their tongues. For hours, they wandered, gathering strange, savory pods and tart berries that popped with flavor. It was a banquet of the unknown. They returned to the ship, bellies full and spirits high, and plotted a course for the next coordinate. The ship dropped out of warp near a world trapped in a permanent golden sunset. Endless forests of crimson and russet leaves stretched to the horizon, swaying in a wind that smelled of dried earth. They hovered low, cameras recording the riot of color. The silence of the autumn world felt heavy, almost expectant. Suddenly, the proximity alarms blared, a harsh, rhythmic screech that cut through the calm. Blueberry banked the ship hard, but the viewport filled with the metallic glint of dozens of drones. They swarmed from the tree line like angry hornets, locking onto the hull with blinding energy beams. The ship bucked, the hull groaning under the crushing weight of the energy net. Blueberry slammed his hands onto the console, but the controls were dead, the screens flickering with static. Outside, the swarm of drones pulsed in unison, their metallic shells reflecting the dying light of the autumn world. They tightened the net, dragging the vessel backward toward a massive, shimmering rift that tore open in the sky. The cabin tilted violently. Rum and Sora grabbed the overhead rails as the ship was yanked into the rift, the world of crimson leaves vanishing in a flash of blinding white light. Gravity shifted, pulling them sideways, then down, then nowhere at all. The sensation of motion stopped as abruptly as it had begun. The ship slammed into a docking bay, the impact rattling every bolt in the frame. Outside the viewports, the view had changed. They hung suspended in a vast, sterile chamber of polished obsidian and cold, white light. Massive, silent structures loomed in the distance. A low, rhythmic hum vibrated through the floorboards, the sound of a place where laws were absolute. They were trapped in the X-Court, and the air here tasted of ozone and finality. The docking bay doors hissed open, revealing a chamber of towering obsidian pillars. Guards with shifting, metallic forms marched the group into the center of the X-Court. The air felt thin, pressurized by the gaze of thousands of silent observers in the gallery. At the high bench, the prosecutor stood, a tall figure holding a glowing data shard. He slammed it onto the table, projecting a holographic image of the ship they had found. He pointed a sharp, metallic finger at the hull markings, claiming it belonged to a missing space commander. He accused them of theft and murder, his voice echoing like grinding stone against the chamber walls. Blueberry stepped forward, his boots clicking sharply on the polished floor. He looked up at the prosecutor, his jaw set, and began to speak. He recounted the hours spent in the forest, the grime they scrubbed away, and the mechanical labor of Euler and the others. He argued that they were scavengers of history, not criminals of war. The prosecutor scoffed, dismissing the testimony as a fabrication. He demanded a verdict, his eyes flashing with cold, calculated intent. The room erupted in a low, dangerous murmur. Blueberry felt the weight of the court pressing down. The prosecutor raised a hand, ready to demand a final sentence, when the central console of the X-Court flared with a violent blue light. A high-pitched, rhythmic signal cut through the heavy silence of the chamber. Every head in the gallery turned toward the main screen. A transmission from the distant Andromeda sector was patching through, overriding the court's local network. The image stabilized, showing a desolate, rocky moon and a metallic pod half buried in gray dust. The prosecutor froze, his hand hovering in midair. A voice crackled over the comms, confirming the discovery of the missing space commander, alive and held in stasis within the wreckage. The room erupted in a chaotic roar. The holographic evidence of the crime, the supposed murder, dissolved into static. Blueberry watched as the judge tapped a sequence into the bench, the obsidian pillars shifting to reveal the exit doors. The judge leaned forward, offering a brief formal nod of apology toward the group. The doors slid open, and the cold, sterile air of the court finally felt like it was letting them go. The sterile halls of the X-Court faded behind them as they stepped onto the bustling platform of the transit hub. They needed silence. They needed something that did not feel like a cage. They navigated through the neon-drenched streets until they found the Galaxy Express, a diner glowing with soft amber light. Inside, the air smelled of grilled meat and synthetic spices. They slid into a circular booth, the worn cushions feeling like a sanctuary. Gwenna approached, a notepad in hand, and offered a nod that acknowledged the exhaustion etched into their faces. She simply took their orders and returned with plates of steaming space burgers and cosmic fries. The first bite grounded them. They told Gwenna about the forest, the derelict ship, and the long weeks of labor. She listened, interjecting with tales of her own travels. For the first time since the trial began, the group laughed. They were a team, and here, they were finally home. The walk back to the hangar was quiet, the air of the city hub humming with the distant vibration of departing shuttles. They stepped onto the ramp of their ship, the familiar scent of ozone and recycled air greeting them like an old friend. Blueberry led the way to the bridge, where the main console flickered with a soft, standby glow. As they gathered around the screen, a new notification icon pulsed in the corner. A formal letter materialized, its digital seal shimmering with the official insignia of the Interstellar Registry. They watched in silence as the text scrolled by. A full, irrevocable transfer of ownership for the vessel, issued to the entire team. The weight of the legal documents settled over them, turning the ship from a salvage project into their undisputed home. Rum reached out, tapping the screen to confirm the receipt, and the console chimed a melodic, affirmative tone. Sora leaned back against the bulkhead, a grin spreading across his face as he looked at the others. They had started as friends seeking a simple adventure in the woods, and now they were captains of their own destiny. There were no more courts, no more accusations, and no more hiding. They stood together in the heart of the ship, the vast expanse of the galaxy waiting just beyond the hull. They set a new course toward the unknown. They were ready.